This is Hidden Killers with Tony Bruschi.
When it comes to behavioral analysis and criminal investigations, there's one thing we know for sure. Patterns don't lie, but people do. And in the Delphi murder case, the patterns of behavior, deception, and decision-making don't just raise red flags, they practically set the whole case on fire. We now have a jailhouse confession that was ignored, a prosecutor who may have buried critical evidence, and an investigation that seemed to conveniently stare away from all of the obvious suspects. All while the man now sitting in prison, Richard Allen, insists he had nothing to do with these murders, even if half of the allegations about missing evidence, investigative bias, and alternative suspects are true. Just half. In this case, isn't just about solving a crime, it's about how law enforcement handles high-pressure cases and whether tunnel vision can lead to catastrophic mistakes or even worse. So who better than to break all this down than Robin Dreeke, retired FBI special agent, former chief of the Counterintelligence Behavioral Analysis Program. Robin, looking at the behaviors of both the suspects in this, law enforcement in this case, does this look like a legitimate investigation, or does this look more like a textbook case of tunnel vision gone wrong, or is it beyond that? Are we into new territory where this can't be tunnel vision anymore? Too many coincidences.
You know, I really wish I could put a label on it because all I see is chaos.
Yeah.
It's really chaotic, you know, and when you can't figure, I always have a rule of thumb when approaching any kind of situation, any kind of human being, any kind of engagement where we're analyzing. If you can't figure it out and it seems really complicated, that means there's a lack of transparency someplace.
Mm-hmm.
And because human motivations are really, really simple and predictable. And that is, everyone is always seeking to act in their own best interests, of their own safety, security, and prosperity from their own point of view and their own context, which is deep empathy. If you understand that point of view from someone else's context in life, you can then predict their behavior. When you understand that life arc and you get data points from the time of their first formative years, they're in the ages of roughly 9 to 19, and you start seeing how they decision make and the choices they're making, it's following an arc, a pattern. And then every decision along that pattern, they think they are acting in their own best interest, including, unfortunately, in some cases where violence starts escalating. It follows that pattern. And what we've seen multiple times here that you and I keep covering, and a lot of other people are covering, is Richard Allen's pattern of behavior of life did not follow he committed these murders. Now, granted, he might have. He was accused of it. He was convicted of it, and he's in prison for it. But it does not follow that pattern of behavior because the number one thing they used against him was his own confession. I want to really reiterate this a lot. Confessions derived from torture are not admissible. He was tortured.
Mm-hmm.
The way he was treated, I mean, think about the Geneva Convention. Think about all these things we think about when it comes to torture. Guantanamo Bay. All these things, when you put someone in isolation, the psychological torture they're under, plus the fact that he had some psychological issues before that, as is reported, anything he says is,
Yeah.
It's really, it's the same reason. So think about this. If you want to do a kind of compare and contrast, because some people say, well, he admitted it, get over it, he's guilty. Yeah, well, torture or mishandled psychological things put on you, polygraphs aren't admissible in court either.
No.
Because it's a behavior. It's a physiological response to outside stimulus that the machine is measuring no matter what you say.
Mm-hmm.
And so even polygraph examinations, truth detectors are not admissible in court. So why should this confession? That's why we do investigations, to follow the arcs of pattern. And then you have these other two individuals who fit a pattern behavior. They had contact with the subjects. There's confessions in jail. There's all these other things that follow an arc that makes sense. Not saying they're guilty or innocent, but that say we need to look here instead of someone's life that doesn't fit that arc. That's where there's weird chaos going on.
And also where we have a pattern of behavior is with law enforcement in Delphi, covering things up, lying about it. Was it the sheriff or the chief? Somebody just stepped down in the last couple of weeks because of another case they were caught lying about. And if we go back further, I'm doing a whole piece on this, on the history of Delphi and their issues, and there's a lot of them. It follows a pattern of covering things up to protect this ecosystem of certain people in there and ignoring blatant evidence, the Ron Logan evidence. There's a ton of it. We've gone over it ad nauseum. And you have the Keegan Kline evidence. We've talked about that ad nauseum as well. Neither of them ever charged with anything. Keegan Kline is away on child porn charges, like the upstanding individual he is, but he never was charged with anything to do with Delphi, even though they were monitoring him. They were monitoring him using the username Anthony Shots, trying to catfish and solicit little girls to go meet him somewhere. He was even communicating with one of these girls to go meet him somewhere the day of the murders. And somehow, the Delphi investigators, the Delphi authorities looked the other way. We have another one, and this is the new bombshell from this week. It is the supposed confession letters that were disseminated out by Ricky Davis, who was a cellmate with Ron Logan back in 2017. Back before we had Richard Allen even on the radar. He wasn't even a suspect. He wasn't even in the mix at this moment in time. And they don't really have anybody other than a lot of interest in Ron Logan. And the FBI is saying, Ron Logan, look at this. We're going to go in and invade the house, and we're going to raid it, and we're going to get all this information. We don't know what they ever found because, well, Delphi shut that down and shut all that information down. But you have a confession allegedly from Ron Logan with information to Ricky Davis that no one else would have known, only the killer at the scene, because these things were not disseminated to the public yet, specifically the murder weapon, the box cutter. We did not learn it was a box cutter until 2024. No one did. But he was talking about it. Ricky Davis, who was in the same cell as Ron Logan, who's saying, Ron confessed to me. He has these details. He even ties in Keegan Kline into the whole situation as well. And he says, letter after letter ignored. Nothing seen by McClelland, the prosecutor in this case. Now, when you send letters out of prison, they're scanned, they're looked at, they get into some sort of a database. One would hope that they still have evidence of this if they ever got out of the prison. And that's the first question, because the defense of Richard Allen is saying, okay, you would have had these letters, Mr. McClelland, and if you did not turn them over in discovery, because that you need to do that. It's rules of discovery. And if you did not do that, you are basically hiding evidence that could very much exonerate Richard Allen. The big question is, did he have those letters? McClelland, as of this recording, has not responded yet. Simple yes, no. Do you have them? Nothing. Just skirting around the issue, not saying anything at all. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about jailhouse confessions. Obviously, this is a letter not directly from Ron Logan, but from an inmate that was next to him. How much credence do you put on something like that? Especially with a guy that says he has nothing to lose. He's not there asking for leniency on his sentence. He's even offering to wear a wire if they didn't want to look at the letters. Let me wear a wire. You can hear him tell me these things. And they said, you don't need to do that.
Yeah, so jailhouse confessions and information like that, it will always have credibility issues,
Sure.
obviously. But again, it's data points, and it's congruent data points. There's so many congruent data points pointing to someone other than Richard Allen. That's why and to me, I still have highlighted right on my notes here. You know, to me, when March in 2017, when the FBI executed a search warrant on Ron Logan's property because of the probable cause that they had, that to me said a lot, because it's not because it was FBI. I want to be very clear on that. It's because it's objective outsiders. You know, everyone in life needs a loving critic, because a lot of all of us, as good as I am at behavior analysis, my wife is my loving critic, because she can be objective for me. If I'm emotionally attached to the outcome I'm seeking, I'm not going to be as good as I could be, as I am for you, Tony.
Yeah.
You know, because I can be objective for you because I care about you, but I'm not tied to your outcome. My wife does it for me. That's why when we have critical cases like this, especially if it's going to be a small town, especially when we might know everyone, like you were saying, having someone with an objective outside optic looking in, given that insight, that's what the FBI does when they come in on most of our cases. We come in as objectivity, as a resource to give that kind of viewpoint. That's what they gave in this affidavit. In their search warrant, ignored.
Mm-hmm.
Why? I think there's a lot of really, really messy, horrible things going on there.
And that's the pattern of behavior that we're seeing on the part of law enforcement, ignoring obvious signs, obvious red flags that at the very least should be looked into. You don't have to think they're real, but you got to look, because they all connect to the same group of people that we're talking about here. Some of the same people whose interviews, video interviews, just happen to be taped over when the defense of Richard Allen said in the discovery process, "We'd like to see those, please." "Oh, they're gone. We lost them. We accidentally taped them over on the DVR. Whoops. Oh, and by the way, there was nothing on them. You got to trust us. There was nothing there. Nothing there at all. We have a great track record of not lying, so of course what we're saying is true." That's gone. These letters, we don't know where they're at right now. I'm thinking they're probably, as we're speaking, still trying to figure out what story they're going to tell of, did we lose them? Did we get them? Do we have them in our presence, but we just never even realized we had them? Or what happened here? Because this is going to take a little coordination, too, on the part of all of them if they're going to cover this up, because we have to, number one, determine if it left the jail facility or the prison facility where he was. Did it get to McClelland? And then what happened with it after that? If he's covering this up, if he never dispersed this information, we have a very big problem here in terms of why was this part not out there? But the other bigger problem is you still have Judge Gull, who's going to do the ultimate ruling on this until it gets to an appellate level.
Yeah, because Gull is still in charge of this, my my faith is low right now, just because things don't seem to be adding up every time she rules on something. And so we'll see how that goes. For people, paying attention to this, just do this on your own. You don't need, us sitting here as any experts or anything talking about human behavior. Just do this on your own. Google the probability, type in the Google machine. What's the probability of a murder of 2 girls by someone unknown in their life?
Just that alone.
Just that alone. And then Google this. Compare that to the probability of murder of 2 young girls by someone who is a sex offender and has connectivity in their lives.
And you find them on their property.
And so when you just look at the law of probability, and this is what investigators do. Again, it's not like a 50-pound brain kind of thing. When you're doing an investigation, you have a lot of data points and you have to create filters. Filters help us focus in on areas that we need to spend our time on and areas we don't. So if you have 3 individuals that are proximity that might be potential suspects, and you just do that simple calculation, where are you going to spend your time? Well, I have a sex offender and I have someone that's also connected with the family. It's his property and he's there. See what I mean? And then you have Richard Allen. And also you have a physical description of someone and a photograph of someone on a bridge that looks like one of the guys. That's not Richard Allen.
Nothing to see here. Nothing to see here. Move on, everybody. There's nothing.
It's not 50-pound brain kind of stuff. And then when you then put all the life arcs behind these things, you just look at what matches and what doesn't match. And Richard Allen just is not a match. And if all you're hanging that on is a shell, a round that might match his gun, and the fact that he confessed while being tortured, that's a crap case.
Add that to the mix. Yeah, I love the confessed while being tortured.
I'm throwing that torture in there. That was torture.
What will it take in a case like this for something else to get involved? With the FBI to get involved in this, not even necessarily. I mean, yes, on the case itself, but I feel like they need to be walking into a public corruption investigation of some sort here, because this town has got their work cut out for them. I'm just beginning to dig further beyond this case into some other cases in this town, and oh my God. This town has issues. Their policing system has issues. There clearly is something going on here where we're going to steer the narrative however we want to do it to cover for whoever we need to do it for. And people resign and they step down and they shift this place and that place. But nobody ever really gets held accountable for it under the law, other than when they walked away from it when it really gets tough. What would that take? I mean, what would it take to trigger an FBI investigation into the actual town itself? Because I think that you're not going to get anything changed here. We're not going to get a legitimate investigation. We're not going to get anything as long as the same people who are there are there.
I'll tell you, one of the challenges of public corruption investigations is sources.
Yeah.
Just think back to the Alec Murdaugh case, getting people to flip against the establishment in where it's so rooted so deeply, that is a big challenge. Because the number one thing the FBI does is we prosecute cases, and we do that by developing confidential human sources. That's pretty much the bedrock. You're investigating a case in all the violations that we have, whether it's counterintelligence like I did, or whether it's crime, other types of crimes that the rest of the Bureau did. And we do those cases by utilizing sophisticated techniques. Sometimes those are technical, but technical we usually go to when we fail to get confidential human sources. Human beings are the best sources of information for all of our investigations. They lead us down roads. They give us the nuance. They give us context. They give us everything we need for prosecution to get the data points, the forensic data points we're going to need to bolster that case. But it's always confidential human sources. And so especially in a public corruption case, these people, if they have a life arc of reps of covering for each other, their own sort of wall, breaking that wall and getting someone on the inside to flip and tell the Bureau, or to tell anyone outside there what's actually going on, and what sheet of paper to look up, to lift up and see, and actually see how things are being done. That is the great challenge of public corruption case. And also because unfortunately, the way the government tends to work, it's like, what's the bang for the buck? What kind of remunerations, what kind of dollar amounts are tied to this? Public corruption cases are very challenging. Here's another reason why public corruption cases are challenging. So again, I don't know the dynamic of the field office of the FBI that covers this region, but this isn't just one thing they're covering. They're covering a lot of things. There's always a lot of law enforcement collaboration that goes on between federal, state, and local. And if they're working on other investigations that they need certain people for, certain resources for, they don't want to ruin a relationship here because we need a relationship here because we're doing X, Y, and Z. So you have a lot of bureaucratic gyrations that are also going on that play into that, which again, I'm not privy to. I can't imagine what a small place like Delphi would be in that mix. But when you're looking at resources at the federal and state level that might be drawn into other areas, taking a huge focus to go into Delphi might be a great challenge, especially if you don't have the ability to crack that wall.
Well, I might have some sources here. We have the former Carroll County Chief Deputy Michael Thomas, who sued after being demoted for questioning the Delphi investigation. If he has evidence of misconduct, that could be an interesting source. He was basically demoted and pushed away when he said, I don't think the way you're handling this is correct. You also have Ricky Davis, who we were just talking about, the inmate who claimed Ron Logan confessed and sent letters to McClellan, could potentially work with the FBI to verify that the letters were ever received, logged, or discarded. Now, the thing that Delphi officials say about him, and I always find it amusing how they use the term miserably to note the word polygraph test. They're always like, he miserably failed his polygraph test. They don't tell us when he took it, who administered it, what questions were answered. Nothing about that, like the actual facts of if it actually took place. And considering the source, it's saying he miserably failed it, I don't put a whole lot of weight on that. Could the FBI take him in and say, let's do our own polygraph on you. We got some of the best people in the country who know how to do this correctly. We're unbiased. Let's get you in for a polygraph. And if he passes that one, maybe, I know polygraphs are not admissible in court, but we're talking the investigation standpoint here of, okay, well, what was in those letters, Mr. Davis? And what can you tell us? Because he's not dead. He's still around, at least for now, until, the Delphi gremlins get him. But I'm just wondering if this is true, if he has this information, and we can take away that BS of Delphi saying, oh, he failed the polygraph miserably. I think there's some credibility here that could probably go somewhere. Plus, you got the other officer who basically was, demoted and demeaned.
Yeah, you just need you need a couple, and you don't need many, just a couple good investigators that are good interviewers. And even with the polygraph, just think about this too, everyone listening, watching, think about how many times have we seen someone saying, besides Maury Povich, the lie detector said this, the truth detector said this, we detected, no, it doesn't
You're a
work.
dad!
Right. See, that stuff doesn't work. Yeah. What the polygraph is great for, as a great friend of mine said, it's a great prop for someone who's a fantastic interviewer. Mm-hmm. And then what happens is that a great polygraph interview, the interview itself is what's admissible. It's the confession that they get because of that interview, which is admissible or not. See what I mean? So it's actually the interview itself, using a prop of a polygraph, because it might inspire someone to think that I have to tell the truth, or it's showmanship a lot of times. But a great polygrapher is first and foremost the most amazing interviewer that inspires someone to feel safe, to bring their shields down so they can feel safe to share all the heinous, horrible things they did. And there's a prop of a polygraph right here.
I hope they do something. And there could be other folks out there listening in Delphi right now who may not realize the power that they have. If you're aware of anything that's gone on, if you're someone who's working with a court official, a clerk, an administrative staff member, former employees, anything like that, who has some knowledge of things that were influenced by pressure from one side or the other, prosecutors in this case, specifically law enforcement or external figures, speak up. There's ways of contacting the FBI to do just that. There's a lot of, because again, this all doesn't happen in a vacuum. There's people involved in this, whether they even realized at the time they were involved in something nefarious or not. Even if something nefarious isn't happening right now, if it's just all complete, horrible decision making, and we ended up doing all these bad, horrible things, and we put a guy away because we're that incompetent, it still needs to be looked into, nefarious or not.
Right. 100%. And it's hard to recognize, because again, I'm always the glass half full kind of guy. I'm never thinking things are nefarious. I don't think of conspiracies. I think people fall into easy groupthink. Mm-hmm. And I'm still on the side of, unless I see data, to me, this is a really great, fantastic, horrendous case of a lot of groupthink that went sideways. But we do have data points that says there could be nefarious things going on, because, how many times have we seen a lot of things going sideways because the local officials are not as up and up as they should be?
No way, shape, or form.
Yep.
The world of true crime never stops, and neither do we. Press subscribe now to get daily updates, in-depth analysis, and expert opinions from the Hidden Killers podcast and True Crime Today.